Hello once again, and welcome to the latest edition of Under the Macroscope, our weekly catch-up with Skybound Capital's chief strategist based in the London office, Jabir Sadawala. Our podcast available on Apple, Spotify, and the Google podcast platform for Android. We thank you for those of you who have downloaded and subscribed already, and we're getting some wonderful feedback, so please keep it coming. Jabir, in the last couple of weeks, not surprisingly, vaccine programs, vaccinations have been a key topic, and it's no different this week. We're 1 month, almost to the day, into a Biden presidency, and the vaccination programs rolling out, certainly in the US and the UK at great pace. There are, though, as you are quick to point out, certain things that can go wrong, and I guess a key topic for us this week is going to be the impact on the vaccination program and the continued rollout on growth.
Yeah, that's right. So thank you, Matt. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I always said at the start of the year that when I presented internally that it's going to be a year that comes down to the vaccine rollout. That will determine pretty much everything that takes place. And I have to admit, based on the latest stats, it's looking very impressive indeed. I mean, we can, it's not often you can use the word exponential, but this is looking very exponential. And certainly in terms of the key players, vaccination rates have now hit very high levels indeed. So to give you an idea, I mean, based on the current rate, I'm building upon some fairly modest assumptions. The US and UK, as an example, should be reaching herd immunity by about April, May of this year. And it's not a coincidence that the talk about easing from this lockdown is coinciding with that timescale. Actually, I think overall it's going to be quicker than expected, but it's not without its risks. I don't think anyone is blind to this. There are a couple of risks that I see. One is that, God help us if we end up with another variation, a new strain on this virus that really does play havoc, with the vaccines that we have right now. We saw the challenge presented by the strain that was found in South Africa, for instance, on the current drug makers. So it really, that is the one big unknown in all of this. The other is in terms of manufacturing capability. And we've seen, for instance, a bit of a setback in the Russian manufacturing scene. And they've now had to outsource a lot of their manufacturing to other countries, to 10 countries, in fact, across 15 manufacturers. Those countries include Brazil, China, India, South Korea. So, these are very prevalent, but it's very much subject to that. But the impact on growth, once that easing takes place, is going to be significant.
And we're seeing that in some ways. You did a presentation to colleagues, I know, where employment numbers, or rather more accurately, unemployment numbers have changed rapidly, which indicates a real positivity in some major markets.
Yeah, I think, the problem with certain indicators is that they are what economists would call lagging indicators. So it's a bit like driving and looking in the rear view mirror. So what's done is done, it's in the past. It's very difficult to come up with forward-looking indicators. So unfortunately, much of what we're still seeing is based on timescales of between 30 days and possibly 60 days. It's behind us. The point now is that, what happens when the easing begins. That's why unlike many others, I don't place a huge amount of emphasis on unemployment numbers, because for the most part, particularly when you're talking about developed economies, which by definition are more, for instance, reliant on consumer demand, their workforces tend to be quite flexible. So, for instance, the losses have been primarily and understandably in the service sectors. So the pickup there, I would expect to be significant. Just, if you think about it, what's being closed down? Restaurants, bars, centers, public centers, malls, and so on. Well, once they start to pick up, you're going to need people who can start to staff this again. So I don't see a major problem there. And you are seeing signs in the private sector of a pickup. But the overall headline figure is still quite ugly to look at.
What are the things that we need to look out for, Jabir, at a macro level, especially assuming that the programs roll out according to plan?
Yeah, so the first thing, which we are actually seeing right now, is what the situation is with government 10-year bond yields. And they're already, I would hasten to use the word alarmingly, seen a dramatic pickup. So the start of the year is an example. If you take the US government 10-year bond yield, that's in many respects the risk-free rate, on the assumption that the US government can never default. And let's pray that it never does. That started the year at about 1%. It was actually, to be exact, 0.99. And today it's already at around 1.3, 1.31. That's a big move. It might sound small in the grand scheme of things, and it's not going to damage anything overnight. But such a shift in such a short period of time, and here we are roughly middle of February, that just illustrates how markets are pricing in the forward effect of what could be the result, the beneficial result of the vaccine program and what it all means. So again, it comes back to this rear view mirror, forward-looking type analysis. They're trying to look ahead and they're saying, based on what we know with the vaccine progress, this is what we're pricing in. So that would be point number one. You can throw into the mix that the US is trying to negotiate a stimulus plan. Biden has proposed a $1.9 trillion spending plan. That's roughly 9% of US GDP. These figures are staggering. And that's going to be financed through debt. So that's more public debt. And then you have, behind the scenes, all the sort of monetary stimulus that's still going on. Something else that then needs to be looked at as another indicator is the inflation indicator. Now, this is a hot topic. For a long while, I felt like I was in the loan camp. Now it's like every other article you pick up, it's around inflation. And you are starting to see a pickup. Now, we're coming off such a low base that I think the general reaction here is, look, guys, we don't need to worry about it. It's fine. Obviously low base, supply constraints. And look, that may be. So the risk in that theory is that it's a short-term phenomenon and that eventually it will all correct. I'm just not so sure, because I think the sheer public debt mountain this time round is so significant, created, orchestrated by the fiscal side of life, that it's not going to go away so easily. But it's evident in some of the key ingredients. I mean, look at food. It's easy, for instance, to look at food price inflation and say, well, okay, yep, that's going up, 3, 4, 5% per annum. That alone is a lot. And that's significantly more, probably 3, 4, 5 times more than the headline rate of inflation. But when you dig even deeper, some of them are quite concerning, and they've seen huge price rises, just this year alone. Whether you're looking at corn or pork and hogs and all this kind of stuff. This is an important part of some certain countries' diets. Then look at energy. You've seen what's happened with oil. It's gone through the roof. And I'm talking about even before the severe bad weather that Texas is going through. And then you have precious metals, you have industrial metals. These have all shown big increases. So at some point, that's going to have to come through. You've got a limited supply chain at one end because of the cutbacks during COVID. And at the other end, you've got severe input prices coming in. Something has to give. So that's another one to keep an eye on.
Inflation is never really that far from any conversation we have with you at the moment. I know you keep a very close watching brief, but it's probably worth bringing to people's attention, because it's fascinating when you think about things this way. It's not only rising prices that indicate inflation. You made a fascinating observation about the gaps between the triangles on a certain well-known brand of chocolate. And we're seeing the size of soft drinks diminishing, but the price not changing. So inflation isn't just about what you see on the price tag. It can come through in a variety of ways, but eventually something has to give, as you say.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, it's almost like a magician's trick. They get you looking in one direction, but you don't think about the obvious. And often the answer lies in the obvious. That's absolutely true. You mentioned soft drinks just now. And that's noticeable in the size of the bottle. It has been reduced from 1.5 liter bottles to 1.25 liter bottles. But guess what? There's no change in the price. Now, we're led to, what is the definition of inflation? It is a sustained increase in the price, a sustained increase. But what about the inverse? Typically a sustained increase means the same amount, but it costs you more. But what about the opposite? You pay the same, but you get less. Isn't that inflation in stealth? And that's exactly what we're seeing. Now, manufacturers, to my mind, have been doing this for a long time. And that's part of the reason why I think we've got away with such low inflation to begin with. And that's why a lot of, and I don't blame economists for this, they need a measure at the end of the day, but you have to adjust for it. It's like the old productivity debate. Technology has gone such a long way to enhancing productivity. Well, surely you can factor in quantity changes to adjust for inflation baskets. But it's never been done. And I think the most frustrating thing to any consumer, certainly in the low to middle income groups, is they're seeing their shopping bills go up. They're seeing their utility bills go up. They're seeing their energy bills, petrol or home heating bills go up. And at the other end, you have these authoritative figures, politicians and central bankers and eminent economists telling you, no, look, we've got it under control. It must be so damn frustrating. But that is absolutely right. I think for many years, we've had inflation by stealth, and now it's got to a point where it can't go on. I think it's got to manifest itself in official inflation.
Well, no matter what the key main topics are of Under the Macroscope next week, we know that Jabir will always be keeping an eye very closely on inflationary trends. So there's plenty to look forward to in Jabir's Week in Review. If you want to subscribe to the podcast, go to Apple, Spotify, and the Google podcast platform for Android. And if you want to look at some of the past podcasts, they are available on Skybound Capital's website at www.skyboundcapital.com. As always, our thanks to Jabir for his ongoing insights. And until the next edition of Under the Macroscope, have a great week.